Hello, let's start our second topic by looking at the very beginning of the medicine. Today we are going to talk about folk medicine, how it started with prehistoric primitive people and why is it still present at modern time. So, as you already know, the development of medicine in past went through four main stages. In this part of our topic, we are going to discuss the first one, the stage of primitive medicine. Before we begin, we should address few things about our topic. First of all, the type of medicine we are going to look at has a lot of names that are sometimes contradict each other. You can know it as primitive medicine because it was and is practiced by primitive societies. You can know it as folk medicine because it is practiced by ordinary people. You can know it also as unconventional, unofficial, or untraditional medicine because it stands outside of modern scientific medicine. But at the same time, some people call it traditional medicine because it is a part of folk traditions. For the sake of our convenience, we are going to call it primitive or folk medicine. The next thing we need to address is that primitive medicine has a starting point. It emerged with the very beginning of human history, but it has no ending point because it was always popular among a certain type of people and never faded away, even after medicine shifted to new phases of its development. By the end of this video, we will try to understand why it happened so, but for now, let's start our journey with the emergence of medicine in prehistoric times. Millions of years ago, proto-humans appeared. From them, 300,000 years ago, humans of modern type evolved, the Homo sapiens. It led to the increased life expectancy and population growth. Along with the climate change, about 120,000 years ago, it led to human migration from Africa to other continents. The first people suffered from fewer diseases than modern people. It was because they were hunter-gatherers and always ate fresh, high-calorie and healthy food. To have enough prey to hunt, they had to constantly move, following migrating herds of animals. Therefore, they didn't stay at one place for a long time, so their environment was always fresh and not polluted. They didn't establish permanent contacts with other groups of people, and therefore there were not many ways of spreading disease between tribes. In addition, due to the fact that tribes were usually small, it prevented the genesis of pathogen pools. It means that in huge groups, pathogens are getting stuck for a long time, going from one person to another, evolving, multiplying, and disseminating. But when a small group encountering a pathogen, it could totally extinct or quickly develop immunity. Diseases of primitive people were associated mainly with a difficult and dangerous lifestyle and few infections. So those few diseases they had were malformations, arthritis, multiple injuries and fractures, diseases associated with soil bacteria that could have been contracted through wounds on the skin of the feet, and also infections transmitted to humans through raw meat and insect bites. Some of the infectious disease appeared frequently, and some became endogenic for specific tribes or regions. It made people to adapt to those infections, gradually developing immunity to them. Therefore, some diseases that are tolerated quite easily now were extremely dangerous in prehistoric times. The concept of disease and their treatment in prehistoric nomadic tribes were primitive and based on belief in the influence of supernatural forces on human health. Since the nomadic tribes needed to move often, society could have treated the ill person in different ways. For example, if tribe had to leave their current place of living or had no spare food, the ill person could have been left to die or even expelled from community. But if community had spare food, spare human force and no immediate danger, the ill person could have been treated with pity. His relatives may have fed him, cared for him, and protected him like a weak child. These prehistoric situations formed our mentality. That is why in some nations sick people throughout history were cared for, and in some nations they were cursed and cast away. There was no separate profession of a doctor during this period, and the treatment was carried out collectively throughout group rituals. We do not know much about this period of time because there was no writing system, but some artifacts evidence that prehistoric people had some general ideas about anatomy. For example, on this cave picture, we can see a prehistoric painting of mammoth with a distinctive heart in the middle. We don't know why primitive people painted it, but we can guess that they either understood that heart was the weakest part of their prey, or that it was considered by them as the most substantial part of living being. Now let's talk about what happened when people stopped migrating and shifted to sedentary lifestyle. About 10,000 years before Common Era, the Neolithic Revolution happened. You can also know it as the first agricultural revolution. It was a huge transition of many human societies from a hunting lifestyle to agriculture and settlement. Settled communities permitted humans to observe and experiment with plants, learn how they grow and develop. This new knowledge led to the domestication of plants. Other developments that are found very widely during this era are the domestication of animals, pottery, building of rectangular houses, and many others. New sedentary societies radically modified their natural environment by means of specialized food crop cultivation with activities such as irrigation and deforestation, which allowed the production of surplus food, making possible an increasingly large population. Therefore, the Neolithic Revolution transformed small and mobile groups of hunter-gatherers into large societies accumulated in big villages and even in first towns. This shift in human history had its positive and negative consequences. Let's look at both sides of it. So, in terms of the history of medicine, the positive consequences of the transition to settlement were next. Ceasing of migration led to stress reduction, because migration was very stressful, especially for pregnant women, children, and sick, old, or weak people. A permanent and abundant source of food created the ability not only to feed the whole tribe, but also to accumulate surplus of food for trade inside and outside of the community. Permanent houses and food surplus made care for the sick or weak people much more easier. And most important, the ability to accumulate and exchange goods created background for emergency of crafts. And one of these crafts was medicine, because smart and observant people accumulated not only goods, but knowledge about nature of human body and healing properties of herbs, and started to exchange their services for payment. That is how the first medics emerged. At the same time, the negative consequences of the transition to settlement in terms of the history of medicine were also significant. Cereal diet contained more calories but less protein, less vitamins, and less minerals, which led to the development of deficient disease. Living at one place for extensively long time led to the pollution of the environment. Constant proximity to domestic animals like dogs, cats, cows, goats, horses, chicken, rabbits, and so on, and to parasitic animals and insects like mice, rats, mosquitoes, flies, and many others, introduced humankind to a huge number of new infections. And the development of trade between settlements led to quick exchange of diseases between tribes. Another serious problem for settled people was that the speed of population growth and food consumption outpaced the development of agriculture and the ability to feed everyone. The growing imbalance between food production and food consumption had led to a shortage of resources and the phenomenon known as Malthusian trap. Malthusian trap, named after English economist Thomas Malthus, is the point at which food is no longer sufficient for the entire population, and after which starvation starts, along with the weakened immunity, diseases, and finally extinction of the community. So, as you can see, the shift to settled lifestyle had its positive and negative features. Now let's talk about how primitive people understood health and disease. Prehistoric people didn't have any scientific methods, so they tried to understand their physiology and anatomy based on analogies with what they seen around themselves. Humans imagined themselves as a center of the universe and its small copy. Just like the universe consists of cosmic elements like water, soil, fire, and air, humans were also considered to have same properties. They thought that imbalance of cosmic elements in the universe could lead to disasters. For example, excessive fire believed to cause a drought, lack of fire believed to cause winter, along with temporary dying of nature. This balance of soil caused earthquakes, excessive air caused storms, and excessive water caused heavy rains, and so on. This image of balance of nature prompted primitive people to think about their own health and disease as balance and imbalance of cosmic elements inside their bodies, or divine energies inside their souls. Also, as the universe is whole and inseparable, holistic perception was implied on human nature as well. People believed that if in the universe everything is connected, and any small change in the sky can make huge impact on Earth, human body is also connected inside, and any small change in one part of a body can cause a disease in another its part. Prehistoric people believed that their balance could be disturbed in many ways, but the main distinguishing feature of primitive medicine is the irrational way of understanding the origins and treatment of diseases. We have to understand that prehistoric people believed that their world is full of divine and semi-divine entities that can be good or evil, and living beside them in peace was also seen as balance. To keep this balance in order, people invented rules and traditions. Therefore, the blame for illness was usually attributed to the supernatural forces, like magic or divine will. The sick person could have been blamed in sinful life or displeasing gods. Some diseases were blamed on activities of witches or demons. Some diseases were believed to be contracted even passively, through accident breaking of some rules or contacts with other worlds, for example by touching dead body or visiting places like cemeteries or woods without spiritual protection. Even visiting wells could cause a disease, because in many cultures they believed to be the gates to the underworld. That is why primitive people invented some rituals and amulets to protect themselves from irrational forces that could cast a disease on them or ruin the balance of their souls and bodies. But even in that times, there were diseases that could have been explained more rationally, like common cold that was attributed to freezing, and some accidents that resulted in physical injuries. Therefore, we can divide prehistoric disease treatment into three methods that formed the beginning phase of medical profession. It is spiritual healing, healing with medical substances, and surgery. Accordingly, we can distinguish three types of first medics: as spiritual healers who tried to contact divine forces to cure disease, a medicine man that used their knowledge of nature to search for medicinal plants and cure disease with specially prepared substances, and surgeons who knew how to fix bones and stitch wounds. Figuratively speaking, first medics applied the work of their hearts, minds, and hands to return their patients to a well-balanced state of health. But they all had one common feature that distinguished them from ordinary people. It was complex knowledge, be it the knowledge of spiritual world, knowledge of nature, or knowledge of human body. Though, as you can tell now, only two of these types of medics are still in the healthcare system, and one of them was abandoned in the times of scientific medicine. Surgery of prehistoric times was of the very primitive level, because surgeons didn't have anesthetics yet and didn't understand the need of antiseptics and antibiotics. Operations were primitive, like stopping blood by wound dressing or treating bone fractures. But there was one surgical procedure that still fascinates medical historians because it is unbelievable how it could have been done with such primitive tools and such little knowledge of anatomy. That is prehistoric craniotomy or trepanation. Skulls with small drilled holes are widely spread around the world, at every place where prehistoric people lived. At first, archaeologists thought that these were the consequences of some large-scale war, but medical experts noticed that there are growths around those holes in skulls, which indicate that people continued to live after these holes were drilled, which means that these are not the signs of murder, but the sign of surgical operation. It is believed that this procedure could have been used to treat headaches, epilepsy, and mental illnesses. But given the state of medical knowledge and ideology of the time, we can hardly see it as a modern surgical operations. Most likely, prehistoric people believed that mentally ill person or someone with depression or headache was possessed with evil spirits, and so the holes in the skulls were made in order to let these evil spirits go away of the patient's head. Apparently, people were proud of these holes, because many of these holes were decorated with gems in Americas, and in Europe, operated patients kept their cut pieces of their skulls and used it as a personal amulets. Judging by the number of healed holes on some skulls, some individuals underwent many trepanation procedures. A typical historian would have asked a question: how primitive people could cut open skull and expose such vulnerable part of human body as brain without infecting or damaging it. But as future medics, you probably already know that brain is surrounded by thick membrane called dura mater. Prehistoric surgeons drilled only bone, but didn't usually go further to dura mater. If they did, patient didn't live long. Now let's talk about the ways prehistoric people achieved their medical knowledge. Today, medicine understands the properties of medicinal plants due to scientific achievements of biochemistry, pharmacology, and so on. At the same time, pharmacologists who study the paleobotany of primitive medicine admit that some prehistoric drugs were fairly effective. But how did prehistoric medics, who didn't even have a writing system, could recognize the healing properties of medicinal plants? Well, there is three assumptions on this matter. According to the first one, the choice of the suitable plant was made because of its resemblance to a diseased organ or to the disease itself. As we already know, people of the time considered the human body as a resemblance of the universe. Therefore, plants that resembled organs or diseases were considered curing for that disease. For example, red fruits and vegetables, such as pomegranate or tomatoes, were thought to be beneficial for blood regeneration, and the white spots on the leaves of Algae, which is Pulmonaria officinalis, resembled phlegm from cold, and thus believed to be effective in treating colds. The roots of Mandragora resembles human body, usually child or young female, and believed to be effective for healing female reproduction system. According to another hypothesis, primitive people received valuable experience by observing animals that can feel healing properties of plants by their significantly more developed sense of smell. However, this approach must have been required testing the effectiveness and safety of natural elements for humans. And it is possible that many first medics had to pay for this knowledge with their own lives by testing the effects of new ingredients on themselves. There is also a recent hypothesis that says that at a certain stage of our evolution, human beings had the same ability to sense medical plants as modern animals. For example, evolutionary researchers suggest that the proto-human could sense superfine smells with the Jacobson's organ, but 23 million years ago, we lost this function due to evolution. In modern humans, the Jacobson's organ develops in utero, but subsequently regresses. All studies agree on its non-functional status. Therefore, it is possible that millions of years ago, having more developed sense organs, proto-humans could identify medicinal plants by their smell, as modern cats and dogs do. Later, they lost this ability, but the memory of what plant should be taken for treating certain disease could have still be preserved for some time. Now let's summarize everything that we know about the first stage of the development of medicine. It is characterized by belief in health as balance and disease as imbalance of cosmic elements or energies. Holistic concept of health. There is the idea of the whole structure of human body and soul that resembles the whole structure of the universe. Belief in supernatural causes of disease, an unscientific approach to the choice of treatment methods, lack of clear fixed medical system, a combination of magical and rational treatment, verbal transfer of medical knowledge due to the absence of writing system. As I already said at the beginning of this part of the lecture, primitive or folk medicine has only a starting point, but has no ending point. Despite the development of medicine and the beginning of new stages in its history, folk medicine continued to exist and stay popular among certain circles of society. The reasons for that were the next. First of all, medicine developed mainly in large cities and among wealthy people. At the same time, at the outskirts of empires and among poor people, cheap services of healers and medicine men continued to be practiced at large scale. Another reason was the divergence of the ideology of the ordinary people and the ruling elite. For example, in China, progressive medicine was popular among the elite, and ordinary people preferred to be treated in Buddhist monasteries. Yet another reason is a fear of pain, because folk herbal treatment favorably different from the radical measures of modern clinics. Last but not least, the scientific medicine differs from folk medicine in its dehumanization and anxiety. Patients do not feel psychologically comfortable in modern clinics, and first thing the spiritual healers offer them is psychological relaxation. Since the 19th century, medics increasingly rely on objective data from instrumental diagnostics and stopped communicating with patients as efficiently as they did in ancient times. It led to loss of the psychological connection between doctor and the patient. Thus, feeling themselves not heard and abandoned, patients look for this lost connection in private offices of psychics and doctors of alternative medicine. That is all for today's lecture. See you next time.